Dear students, today just continuing from the previous topic. In the previous topic we have completed the development of female gametophyte, means the embryo sac. The embryo sac, which is 7-celled 8 nucleated embryo sac. In that embryo sac, now the egg is completely ready. Now the egg is waiting for the fertilization by the male gamete. The male gametophyte development also we have seen, but there is a link missing between the development of male gametophyte and the fertilization. That how the male gametophyte develop, the process we have observed, that process we have cleared, but how this male microspore, how that male microspore is reaching to the female flower, that is what the missing series. So today we are just going to understand how this microspore is reaching to the female flower, so that it could further proceed the development of male gametophyte, as well as it could perform the fertilization also. So just see what is there. So we are just going to start with the process that is called as pollination today. So what is pollination? This is very common process. In the earlier classes also you have just gone through, but the process is very important in the plant life cycle, because the pollination is the crucial process which ensures the shifting of the pollen grain from the male flower to the female flower, so that it could proceed for the process of fertilization. So in the very straightforward way, what is the mechanism or what is the meaning of pollination? Pollination is the process of shifting of pollen grain from anther to the stigma. Anther, the structure which is responsible for the formation of the pollen grain, and stigma, which is receiving the microspore after the pollination. So if you have remember, just after the maturation of the pollen grain, when it is getting converted in form of the dust form, the endothecium get burst and the pollen grains are liberated into the atmosphere, and due to that it is now going to reach onto the female flower. There are different ways to reach to the female flower. So let us see how the pollination occurs. So basically, simply, the simplest meaning or the easy meaning of the pollination is that shifting of the transfer of the pollen grain from the anther to the stigma of the female flower. So the process will occurs in between two flower usually. So just before starting the detail of the pollination, we have just studied about the monoecious flower, dioecious flower, sexuality in the organism. Now once again I'm just going to explain the concept on behalf of the plant, whether the plant is monoecious or plant is dioecious. So here I'm just going to say monoecious plant. Monoecious plant, if you have remember, when the flowers are unisexual but both male and female flowers are present on the same plant. Are you getting my point? What is the meaning of monoecious plant? Monoecious plant means the plants which bears both male and female flower, but the flowers are unisexual. Means what? The flowers are not the bisexual, they are unisexual. Each flower is having only one particular type of the sex organ, but they are present, the both type of the flowers are present in the same plant. Dioecious plant, once again the flowers are unisexual, and male and female flowers are present on two different plants. Are you getting my point? What is the difference between monoecious and dioecious plant? Both the plants bears unisexual flower. In monoecious plant, both the flowers, male and female flowers, are having on a same plant, while in the dioecious plant the flowers are unisexual and both male and female flowers are present on two different plants. Is it clear to you all? Now after completing this, now we are moving directly to the types of pollination. How the pollination occur? On the basis of that, the pollination is of two types. First one is called as the self pollination, self with self, within itself. So pollination which occurs inside the same plant. In the same plant, if the pollination occur, then it is called as self pollination. What is the meaning of self pollination? When the pollination occur within the same plant, then it is called as self pollination. Self pollination is again of two types. One is called as autogamy, another one is called as ditonogamy. So let us see what is the meaning of autogamy. If we are just going to see the Greek words or Greek meaning of the autogamy, then it will be very much clear to us. We have to understand the autogamy with the etymology only. We are just going to break the autogamy in two parts, auto plus gamy. Auto means self, this is very common. Gamy word is originated from a Greek word that is called as gamos. Gamos means marriage. Marriage means fusion. Fusion means what? The fusion of male and female flowers. So autogamy means what? Self gamos. Self marriage means when the pollination occurs within the same flower. The different flower is not required. If bisexual flower is there, both the sex organ are present in the same flower, then the pollination will occur in the same flower only. That is called as what? Autogamy. Remember, whenever the autogamy is there, so autogamy will ensure the purity of character, conservation of character. So many of the time horticulturists are just going to promote the autogamy whenever they are just trying to ensure the preservation of the beneficial character. They are just going to preserve any kind of specified character. So this is clear to you all. Autogamy means what? When the bisexual flowers are there, both the sex organs, both the sex organ, carpels and stamens present in the same flower, and that is why the pollination occur in the same flower. So that is what called as autogamy. That is required for the insurance of purity in the characteristic. Geitonogamy is the next one. Once again, Geiton and gamy, two different words are there. Gamos you knows very well. Gamos means the marriage, marriage means the fusion. Geiton word is meant for the neighbor. Neighbor means what? The pollination will not occur within the same flower, but pollination will occur in the another flower of the same plant. So what is the meaning of that? The flowers will be flowers will present on the same plant, so pollination will occur between two different flowers of the same plant. Are you getting my point? The pollination will occur between two different flowers of the same plant. So here the flowers are unisexual, means if a plant bears unisexual flower, so so pollination will occur between male and female flower, but two different flowers on the same plant. So that is called as what? Geitonogamy. Remember, because the plant is common, flowers are different, so that is why genetically this is considered as self pollination. Are you getting what I am saying? Because the flowers are present on the same plant, on a common plant, that is why the geitonogamy is genetically considered as the self pollination. But functionally, because two different flowers are involved here, one male flower is lying somewhere else in the plant and another one is lying there in somewhere else in the same plant, so that is what functionally and ecologically that is considered as the cross pollination. So remember, genetically the geitonogamy is self pollination, but functionally and ecologically that is what? The cross pollination. So till now it is clear to you all. Self pollination within the same plant, whenever the pollination occur, that is called as what? Self pollination. This is of two type. One is autogamous. Autogamous means what? Within the same flower, if the flower is bisexual, then the pollination will called as the autogamy. And geitonogamy, if the unisexual flowers are present on the same plant, so pollination will occur in between the two flowers of the same plant, that is called as geitonogamy. Next type of pollination is called as cross pollination or xenogamy or allogamy. Cross pollination, xenogamy or allogamy, gamos fusion, allos another. Xenos means strange. So strange means what? Whenever the pollination occurs between two different plants, not in the same plant. What is there in autogamy or in the geitonogamy? The pollination process was occurring there in the same plant, but in case of cross pollination, the pollination process will occur in between two different plant of the same species, not of the. So remember always, this is not possible that a flower, the pollen grain of a flower can be dusted on the flower of any other species. So this is required, the flower must be of the same species. So pollination will occur between two different plant of the same species. Is it clear to you all? And this is what the true or real cross pollination. Genetically this is considered as the cross pollination, because now the two different plants are being involved there. So now students, we have seen what is the meaning of self pollination, what is the meaning of cross pollination. Now we are moving ahead of this topic. We are moving ahead in the topic Now we need to understand how the plants are managing themselves for the purpose of self-pollination or cross-pollination, how they're just going to adopt themselves for the cross-pollination or self-pollination. So just take a look on that. First of all, we are discussing the topic how the plants are ensuring the self-pollination, how they are avoiding. If we are just asking, if we are just discussing how the plants are ensuring the self-pollination, at the same time we are discussing how the plants are avoiding the cross-pollination. Are you getting what I'm saying? If the question is there, if the plant is how the plants are adopting, how the plants are ensuring the self-pollination, at the same time we are discussing how the plants are adopting themselves to avoid the cross-pollination. So just take a look on that. The first adaptation, the first devices, the inbreeding devices, what we are saying, why we are saying them as inbreeding devices, because they are being performed for these devices are being used for the inbreeding purpose only, within the flower only, for self pollination only. The first one is called as, first type of adaptation which ensures the self pollination is called as monocliny. Monocliny is simply a hermaphroditism. Hermaphroditism means what? The flower is bisexual. If the flower is bisexual means what? If the flower is bisexual means what? The flowers are bearing both male and female reproductive structure, means what? Stamen and carpels or pistil in the same flower. So that time there is no chances of any other kind of pollination. Whenever the pollen grains will release, they will fall directly onto the stigma of that. So that is going to ensure the self pollination only. They will avoid the cross pollination. Next device or next type of adaptation what the plants manages to ensure the self pollination is called as homogamy. Homogamy is an event where both male and female reproductive structure, means stamen and pistils, gets matures at the same time in the flower. Are you getting my point? When both stamen and pistil are getting matured in the same time, at the same time in a female, in a flower, then it is called as what? Homogamy. What is the homogamy? Maturation of both male and female reproductive part in a flower at the same time is called as homogamy. How the homogamy ensures the self pollination? You just understand well, suppose the anther is getting mature at that time and stigma is ready to receive the pollen grain. So as soon as anther will release out the pollen grain, stigma is ready to receive them, and that is what the pollen grains will get fertilized, the pollen grain will get reached or received in the stigma on that time only, as soon as it is being released. So it is clear, homogamy means what? Same time maturation of male and female reproductive structure in a flower. Next one, very important, Cleistogamy is the third type of inbreeding device or third type of the inbreeding adaptation or adaptation for the self pollination. What is cleistogamy? In the Greek meaning, gamos means fusion, you knows very well, marriage, you knows very well. Cleisto word is originated from the kleistos. Kleistos means closed. What happened? In the nature there are two different type of the flowers. Some of the flowers remains always closed in their lifespan. Some flowers remains closed always in their lifespan. Some flowers remains closed always remain. Remember, I am just repeating the line again and again. The flowers which remains closed in their lifespan throughout their lifespan, they are called as what? Cleistogamous flower, and the pollination or such kind of the situation is called as cleistogamy. Are you getting my point? Some of the flowers remains always closed, they are called as cleistogamous flower. The example for cleistogamous flower is Commelina bengalensis, Viola oxalis, groundnut. Commelina bengalensis, Viola oxalis and groundnut. Remember, these plants are having two types of the flowers present. They are having two different type of the flowers present. They are having cleistogamous as well as the chasmogamous flower both. They are having both type of the flowers present, cleistogamous and the chasmogamous flowers. Remember, Camelina bengalensis is very unique plant because it bears both type of the flower. On the aerial portion it is having the chasmogamous flower. When it is present there bottom of the soil, that time it is having the cleistogamous flower. So they are having both type of the flower, chasmogamous and the cleistogamous. I'm just going to discuss one very important point about the groundnut. Groundnut is ensuring the cleistogamy also, and very important point that we are just going to discuss, the geocarpy. The geocarpy is, geo means earth, carpy means fruiting. So geocarpy is the process of producing the fruit inside the soil only. So you have observed very well, whatever the fruits or seeds are being produced in the groundnuts, they are called as groundnuts because they are produced inside the ground only. So groundnut geocarpy. Is it clear? Whenever any of the fruit is produced inside the soil, that situation is called as geocarpy. Very important question. Next one, what I'm just going to discuss, this is very important. The clistogamous flower produced assured seed sets. Number of time the question was asked there in the CBSE examination. How does the pea plant is able to maintain the assured seed set? This is only an example, a classical example, the pea plant, but many of the examples are there. So whenever the question is there, how does any plants, how does the structure is able to maintain the assured seed set? Assured seed set means fixed number of the seeds are being produced there. They are having the fixed pattern of the arrangement. So whenever the clistogamous flower is there, so there is no chances of the pollination from the outer resources. So whatever the number of pollen grains are there, they are just going to fertilize inside only. So they are always ensuring the assured seed set production. Very important question. Remember, whenever the question is there ki how the plants or any plant is able to maintain the assured seed production, assured seed set production, just because of the clistogamous nature of the flower. So this is clear to you all. Now next type of adaptation, next type of devices that has been adopted by the plants to ensure the self pollination is bud pollination. Bud pollination, very simple. Bud pollination means what? When the pollination process occurs in the bud stage only, that time this is called as bud pollination. The example for the bud pollination is wheat, rice, etc. Last adaptation that they have adopted is called as non-dehiscence of the anther. You knows very well, if the anther get dehiscate, in case of bisexual flower I am just discussing, if the anther get dehiscate, so what will happen? The pollen grain will liberated outside in the environment by the different agencies of the pollination. They will move to the different plants. But if anther remains non-dehiscate, anther remains intact, so whatever the pollen grains will be liberated, they will fall there on the same stigma present in the flower, and that will ensure the in situ germination also. What happens if anther remains non-dehiscate, if anther remains undehiscate, so the pollen grains whatever is getting matured, they develop their they start their germination there only inside the microsporangium. They develop the pollen tube. That kind of germination is called as in situ germination, and the pollen tube is directly reaching to the ovule and will start the fertilization. Are you getting my point? This is very important or crucial point. When the anther is failed to dehiscate, when anther is failed to blast, so what happens? The pollen grains which gets mature will start their germination inside only, and due to their germination, the pollen tube will grow and directly it will reach to the ovule of the female part. So is it clear to you all? This case is reported there in the Voila. Okay, so after discussing the devices or the adaptations made by the plants to ensure the self-pollination, we have to see the adaptations made by the plants or flower to ensure the cross-pollination, and that devices which ensures, or that adaptation which ensures the cross-pollination, that is called as what? Outbreeding devices. Is it clear to you all? The adaptation for the cross-pollination, and very common thing is that whatever the devices, whatever the adaptations are there to ensure the self-pollination, the cross-pollination adaptations will be vice versa of the previous one. Like that, the first one was monocliny. Now I am just saying the first one is dicliny. Dicliny, their unisexuality, and here bisexuality. Bisexuality means what? The flowers are unisexual. The single type of this correction is there. That is what the unisexuality. Unisexuality means what? A single flower bears single flower bear the single type of the sex organ, whether it is male or female. So if flower is male flower or female flower, so there is no chance of getting self pollination there, and definitely they are forced to release out their their pollen grains into the atmosphere. Next one is dichogamy, just opposite to the homogamy. In homogamy we have gone through that homogamy is the process where the two different parts of the flowers, means stamen and the carpel or pistil, getting matured at the same time. But in dichogamy what happen, even if the flower is bisexual, so what will happen, in a bisexual flower both male and female reproductive part will mature at different time period. They are not getting mature at the same time period. So if they are just getting mature at the different time period, so there is no chance of getting fertilization, or there is no chance of getting pollination of there, because you knows very well a question is there, question arises in our mind, why this is so. If they are just in the same flower only, so they may just fall on the surface, and how why they are not able to germinate there. So reason behind that, we have seen the viability of the pollen grains also. The fixed time period is meant for the pollen grain only, and during that time period what will happen, if they are not able to germinate, so the pollen grains will not be able to fertilize the female gamete. So this is what, so two different time for two different type of the structure, means stamen and pistil, for the maturation. So here some specific cases are there. Suppose two different structures, sometimes the androsium and sometimes the gynosium. If androsium matures first, the situation is called as protandry. Prot first, andry androsium. When the androsium get matures first, anther get mature first, then the condition is called as protandry. Protandry. Prot means first, andry means androsium. So when anther get mature first is called as protandry. Example of that, salvia, cotton, sunflower and capsula. The important one, protandrous flower is the capsula. Where protandry is present, that time this is called as the protandrous flower. So capsula, very important question. Capsula we are just seeing from again and again from the previous time only. So capsula is the flower which shows the protandry. And similarly to that, if the flower develops, or if in a flower, if female reproductive part matures first, then the flower will be called as protogyny. Protogyny, proto first, gyny, gynosium. So pistil or carpel mature first, or previous then, or the prior to the male reproductive part, then they are called as protogyny. Example, banyan, people, asok, aristoloxia, cruciferae and rosaceae family. Is it clear? Protogyny means when pistil or carpel gets matures first, or previous to the stamen, and protandrous means when stamen matures previous than the carpel or pistil. So now next one, next device, chesmogamy, just opposite to the cleistogamy. There cleistogamy, the closed flower, there is no chances of any foreign pollen grain to fall on the surface of stigma. And here what happened, due to the open nature of the flower, the open flowers are called as what, chesmogamous flower. So due to the open nature of flower, what will happen, the pollen grains from any of the foreign plant, any of the other plant will fall, or will have chances to fall on the surface of stigma, and that will ensure the cross pollination, not the self pollination. Now next adaptation, next devices that the plant develops for ensuring the cross pollination is called as hercogamy. Hercogamous fusion. Herco means the flowers develop some morphological differences between each other, some morphological barriers between each other, and these barriers are actually working to prevent the shifting of pollen grain between each other. This is the case where the pollination occurs in the bisexual flower only. Are you getting my point? In a bisexual flower, the flowers will develop some morphological differences. Due to that, the morphological barriers will produce in between the anther and stigma, and this is why the pollination between the same flower gets failed. Next one, heterostyly. Once again, hetero, odd, uneven, style. If you remember, style is the part of Female reproductive part carpel, stigma, style and ovary. Heterostyle means what? Sometime the flowers are having, if the bisexual flower is there, so to avoid the self pollination they are having different length of the style. So difference in the length of stamen and style of the same flower, in the same flower, if the difference in the length of stamen and style is there, then this is called as what? Heterostyle. Are you getting my point? What is the meaning of that? Difference in the length of stamen and the style of the same flower is called as heterostyle. Like that, if you just take some example, if the flower is having long style present, so that time the flower will be called as long stylate. If the flower is long stylate, so definitely it will be considered as short staminate. Stamen is short but the style is long. Similarly, short stylate, if the style is short, then definitely the stamen is long, so long staminate. So it is clear to you all, I think. Long stylate, short staminate, the same type of the flower is there. If the style is long, so long stylate, and definitely the stamen will be short, so short staminate. And similarly, just vice versa to that, if the flower is short stylate, so it will be a long staminate. Very important question. The example for that, the primula. Next one, next adaptation to ensure the cross pollination is the self sterility or self incompatibility. Usually, my dear student, we have seen the pollen grains or the flowers are having specific identification mechanism of their particular microspores or the pollen grain. If they are of the same species, then only they are just going to pollinate. This is for the cross pollination. If one pollen grain or the pollen grain from one flower is falling on the stigma of another flower, but what happens? During the avoidance of the self pollination, if the pollen grain from the same flower is fall on the same flower there only, so that time they develop a kind of mechanism, they refuses the germination of the same pollen grain in the same flower. Are you getting my point? So pollen grains are not able to germinate on the stigma of the same flower. They are not able to germinate. That is called as self-sterility, and that is completely a genetic, that process is completely regulated by the genes. That means it is a kind of genetic process. So that we'll discuss only. There are certain factors, certain genes, those are called as S1, S2, S3, S4. We'll discuss later on how the self-sterility or self-incompatibility is being regulated in the plant in the later topics. So here self-sterility is clear to you all, self-incompatibility is clear to you all. Means what? When the pollen grains of the same flower falls on the stigma of the same flower, there only the stigma refuses them for the germination. That is called as self-sterility or self-incompatibility. So is it clear to you all? Now example for the self-sterility or self-compatibility: petunia, thea means tea leaves, passiflora, apple, grapes, tobacco, potato, etc. Are you getting my point? The examples: petunia, thea, passiflora, apple, grapes, tobacco, potato, etc. Okay, so after completing the self pollination and cross pollination, the devices for self pollination and cross pollination, we are moving further in the process of pollination. So now we are just going to discuss some specific carriers of the pollen grains. So we are just going to discuss the topic, that is agencies of the pollination. Agencies of the pollination means the carriers of pollen grain. Basically in case of cross pollination, because in self pollination there is no carrier required, there the pollen grains are falling there on the same stigma flower, so this is not required, there is no requirement of the agency. But in the cross pollination this is very much required, how the pollen grains are covering that much distance from one flower to another flower. So how the flowers are being moved from one flower to another flower, so definitely they are moving from one flower to another flower with the help of the carriers. So these carriers are called as agents of the pollination or agencies of the pollination. So basically three different type of agencies has been reported. Either it is water or it is wind. So whenever the water is working as an agency for the pollination, then it is called as hydrophily. When wind is working as an agency for the pollination, then it is called as anemophily. And sometimes the animals are also working as an important mean of the pollination, then they are called as zoophily. So what is there? Three basic agencies are there: water, air, So the pollination with the help of water is called as hydrophily. The pollination with the help of air or wind is called as anemophily. Since water and wind, or water or air, both are the non-living resources, so these are called as abiotic agencies, and the animals are the living structure, so that is called as biotic agencies. So one by one we are just going to understand the importance and how they are helpful in the pollination. So first we are just going to start with the abiotic agencies, non-living structures. So in the very first we are just going to see the hydrophily. Hydrophily means phyle means pollination. Hydro means water. When the pollination process occur with the help of water, then this is called as hydrophily. With the help of water, remember the questions will be like that, what are the properties in NEET also. They will just provide you the options कि hydrophilic flower may have which one of the following properties, or which will not, the flower may not have this is the properties, or they will just list down some of the properties and you need to find out which one is the correct. So just see what are the properties of the flower, or the properties of flower which were performing, which are being pollinated with the help of water. The flower is small sized, very small size. The light weightage is required, then only they can be moved with the help of the water. Inconspicuous, very small, light weighted, very light weighted, so that easily can move with the help of water current. The very important point, the without nectar and the color, without nectar and odor, sorry, color, they are having the color. Without nectar and the odor, they are not having any specific nutrient material, that is nectar, and they are not having any specific smell, that is called as odor. And one important thing, since they are living there in the water, so they may get spoiled due to the reaction with the water. So to avoid their spoilage, they are being covered externally with the mucilage. The flowers are covered externally with the mucilage. Are you getting my point? The small sized, inconspicuous, very light weighted, they are not having any nectar, they are not having any color, and to protect them from the spoilage in the water, they are being covered externally. Their external surface is covered with the mucilage. The hydrophily is itself divided into two groups, two types. First one is called as hypohydrophily. Hypo means below, hydrophily is clear to you, means the pollination by the water. So in some of the cases, pollination occurs inside the water only. The flower never comes out the water, the flower remain always inside the water. So whenever the pollination occurs inside the water, that time it is called as hypohydrophily. The example of hypohydrophily is Ceratophyllum, Najas, Zostera, and Hydrilla. The important example is Hydrilla. Remember, Ceratophyllum, Najas, Zostera, and Hydrilla. Hypohydrophily means when the pollination occurs all inside the water, flower never comes out of the water. Then next one is epihydrophily. Epi means above the water. So when the pollination occurs on the surface of water, even though this is being reported, the complete life cycle, all the activities of the plant, those who are performing the epihydrophily, that is being completed inside the water, but only the pollination process, for the pollination process, they comes over the surface of the water. So remember, the pollination on the water surface is called as epihydrophily. The pollination on the water surface is called as epihydrophily. For CBSE examination, a great question, very important question, Vallisneria. Vallisneria is the very important example. Every time the examination is having such kind of the questions. Vallisneria is the example of epihydrophily or the hydrophily. This is a dioecious plant. Dioecious plant means what? Both male and female plants are separate. Male flower is present in the separate plant and female flower is present in the separate plant. So what happens at the time of pollination? The male flower get burst out, release out from the parent plant or the mother plant, and just moved onto the surface or released onto the surface of water, will start floating on the surface of water. And the female plant's stigma just comes over the surface of water, or the female plants or the female flower will also come on the surface of the water. At the time of movement, by chance they are just getting contacted to each other and will pollinate to each other. Remember, the process is by chance. We cannot show the surety of the pollination. Even in case of every cross pollination, this is not sure that we are just going to confirm the process of pollination. And basically in case of abiotic resources, so what happen in case of Vallisneria, the male flower will be released from the male plant and will float on the surface of water. Female flower will come out of the surface of the water, and whenever they are just going to contact each other, the pollination process will complete. So it is clear. Now next one, next abiotic agency is called as air. So by the mean of air, whenever the pollination occur with the help of air, anemophily. So whenever the pollination occur with the help of air, this is called as anemophily, and anemophily occurs in the flower. Those flowers are called as anemophilous flower. In which plants? The cereal grains, grasses, cereal grains and grasses, basically the monocots are there, those who are performing the anemophilic pollination. What are the properties of them? What are the properties of the flowers, those who are pollinating with the help of air only? Since they have to move with the help of air, so very important. We cannot say, just now I just discussed there, in case of abiotic agencies we cannot say that 100% pollen grains are just going to fall on the 100% accurate surface or 100% accurate stigma. So there is a great chances of damages of the pollen grain. So what they does, they produce great number of the pollen grains. What they does to ensure to fight against, to compensate the loss of pollen grain during the pollination, what they does, they produce the large number of the pollen grains to ensure their easy movement. The pollen grains are small in size and they are light weighted. What is the basic property? They produce great number of the pollen grains so that they could compensate the loss of the pollen grain. The pollen grains are very small in size and the light weighted to ensure their easy movement with the help of air. They are smooth without any coating on the surface. They are non-sticky and dry in nature. Dry in nature means like a powder substance. They are powdery substance. So what is the basic properties of the male flower? If I am just saying, if the pollen grains are there, so they produced in the great quantity, very small, light weighted, non-sticky, without any smoothness, without any roughness. They are completely smooth and dry nature. And just similarly, to capture these flowers, to capture these pollen grains, the stigma is also having some specific type of adaptation. What is the adaptation there? Remember, stigma to receive such kind of the pollen grains adopted or changed themselves or itself in form of a long structure, in form of hairy or feathery stigma. Long structure, long means the stigma is very much long and well exposed to the air. It is well exposed to the air whenever the pollen grains are moving in the air. So to trap this pollen grain, it get feathery or hairy. You can just feel whenever you're just touching the wheat spikelet, you must feel a rough surface on the stigma of that, and that rough surface is usually meant for trapping the pollen grains thereon. And even in any of the grass family, if you just observe the flowers of the sugar cane, if you just observe the flower of the maize also, you can see that kind of their flowers or the stigma is very much feathery. A white feather like stigma is there, and that feathery stigma is working for what? To trap the pollen grains whatever is moving there in the air. So this is clear to you all. One important property, the anemophilous flowers are without nectar, without fragrance, and they are not attractive flowers. There is no fragrance, there is not no color present. They are white, completely white, dull colored. They are completely white. There is no color, no nectar present, no fragrance present. They are not beautiful flower, not brightly colored flower. So this is what the anemophilic. So till now what we have discussed, the hydrophilic means three type of agencies are there. Hydrophily means with the help of water, anemophily with the help of wind, zoophily with the help of animals. So what is there? Hydrophily by the mean of water. The properties of the pollen grains, very small sized, conspicuous and light weighted, without nectar and the color. Third one, they are covered with mucilage so that they cannot being spoiled with the reaction to the water. Two types of the pollination against in the category of hydrophily. One is called as hypohydrophily, pollination inside the water always occur. Epihydrophily, pollination on the surface of water. The big example for that, the important example for that is Vallisneria. The second important question we have seen that anemophilic flower. Anemophilic flower means when the pollination occur with the help of wind. The pollinating agency is wind. So what did how the pollination occurs? The flowers are have very small flowers. The pollen grains are produced in great number so that they could compensate the loss of pollen grains, since there is no chance, no surety of 100% pollen grains are going to be pollinate to the female flower. Small size so that it can move easily, light weighted, move easily, is smooth, non sticky and dry. And to ensure their easy trapping, the stigma is also getting modified. It is getting long, well elongated stigma is there, so that it should get well exposed in the air. And to trap the pollen grain, the stigma gets feathery or hairy, and easily it can trap out the pollen grains. Second thing, the flowers are not having any specified color, not very much beautiful, not having nectar, not having any smell. So this is what a kind of adaptation in an anemophilous flower. So next we are just going to start, we will just take not today, we'll start today in the next lecture, the zoophily, how the animals are helping in the process of pollination. So I think today's topic is very much clear to you all. Today we have just discussed the self pollination, cross pollination, self pollination within the same plant, cross pollination to different plants, self pollination once again we have divided autogamy and geitonogamy. Autogamy within the same flower, geitonogamy within two different flower of the same plant. Geitonogamy cannot be considered as genetically cross pollination, that is why that is genetically self pollination. Then we have seen the cross pollination, two different plants, two different flowers. Then adaptation, inbreeding devices, outbreeding devices. Inbreeding devices we have seen the like that cleistogamy, monocliny, like that cleistogamy, monocliny, bisexuality, everything we have just clear. And thirdly, when we are just going to when we have seen the outbreeding devices, so just opposite or vice versa to the previous one. So I think now everything is clear to you all. Now for today this is enough. In the next lecture I will just start with the zoophilic situation. Till the time, thank you.